any tools, and so many other things, a variety of things. So, how historians use these things to reconstruct the history of the past? How would we know what happened in the past? So, how they analyze the written text. Today, we are going to learn about it. So, this whole lesson was based on using the written text to reconstruct the history of which period we are talking about, 600 BCE to 600 CE, a period of 1200 years. And a very important text was taken of that period, which was Mahabharata, which tells us gives us a great knowledge about that period. Okay. Also, I want to tell you, and I'll keep telling you repeatedly, that history, when we talk about history, history means that we learn about the society of that period, we learn about the cultural life of that period, we learn about the political life of the period, and we learn about the economic life of the period. Once again, history includes society or social. History includes cultural. What is cultural? We have done it in 11th standard. I do not know how much attention you have paid. But culture, when we talk about culture, it means language, it means literature, it means how we dress, what we eat, what festivals we celebrate. All that is cultural. Then history is also economic. Economic means what is the profession of the people, how they trade, how they make things, from where they get raw material, where they sell, how they sell, to whom they sell. All that is the economic part. In political, Okay, so now how should we use the text which were written so many years ago, thousands of years ago? How should they be handled? That means, how should they be studied so that the information that we gather is close to accurate? It cannot be accurate, it can be close to accurate. So we have to keep certain things in mind. So now this topic is an important part of your lesson, because this is the base. Sources, every lesson will use some kind of source to reconstruct the history. In this lesson, we have used text, and that text is Mahabharata. Okay, handling text, historians, and the Mahabharata. If you look through the sources cited in this chapter, once more, you will notice that historians consider several elements when they analyze text. They examine what are the elements now. When they analyze text, what are the elements that they keep in mind? They are whether the language of the text, which language was used. They have given example of languages here. Sanskrit was also one of them. Okay. So they examine whether texts were written in Prakrit, Pali, or Tamil, languages that were probably used by ordinary people. So ordinary people wrote in Prakrit, Pali, Tamil. And the people who were of some significance, like the Brahmins and the king's royal family, they used Sanskrit. So what is one important thing when we study text? It is the language. So historians keep language in mind when they study the text. They also consider the kinds of text. Next, what they consider kind of text. Were they mantras learned and chanted by ritual specialists, or stories that people could have read or heard and then retold if they found them interesting? Okay, another aspect that historians keep in mind while studying a text is what kind of text it was. Whether they were mantras or whether they were stories, they were written, that could be read and heard. Some people who did not know how to read, they heard the stories. Okay, so third important aspect is, besides they try to find out about the authors, who wrote them. Very, very important, children. Who wrote these texts? Because if they were written by the elite means the kings or the ministers, then they will tell the point of view of the king and ministers, and they will not talk about ordinary people. But if they are written by ordinary people or some other people, they can reflect about the lives of simple, ordinary, common people of that period. Okay. Now, next aspect is audience. What we have done earlier, first thing that historians keep in mind, the language. Second is kind of text, whether it is kind means whether it is mantras or stories. Okay, stories or mantras. All right. So mantras were chanted by ritual specialists. Who are ritual specialists? Brahmins. Third thing to keep in mind is the author who wrote them. Fourth thing to keep in mind is for whom were they written? For whom? Who was the audience? Who were supposed to read these texts? Whether they are for common people, whether they are for ministers, whether they are for the or the travelers who are coming from other countries, who were the audience. As very often, authors keep interest of their audience in mind. Very, very important. So we should know for whom they have written. Have they written to impress somebody? Or they have written to inform? Or they have tried to impress the travelers who are coming from other countries and put a different kind of impression? All that. Okay, and then the date of the composition, or compiling, date of writing or date of compiling. Compiling means they were scattered here and there and then they are put together. Then the place where they were composed. So these are the factors that historians keep in mind when they study the text. It's a very, very important part, children, now what we are doing. Then also, it is only after making these assessments that they draw on the content of the text. Then content is seen. What is the content? What is written in the text? To arrive at an understanding of their historical significance, how important it is. As you can imagine, this is a particularly different task for a text as complex as Mahabharata. For Mahabharata, it was a different task. So many shlokas, to read the shlokas, to understand them, and to keep all these points in mind when studying Mahabharata. Now, out of all these, we are going to talk about the language and the content. See, so many factors they keep in mind. So now, particularly, we are keeping the aspect of language and we are keeping the aspect of content when we are now studying the next topic, language and content. Let us look at the language of the text. The version of Mahabharata we have been considering is in Sanskrit. Okay? Although there are Mahabharata, we have found manuscripts in which Mahabharata was written in different languages all over India, which was spread. Then Suthankar, he collected now in 19th century, he collected all the versions of Mahabharata, put them together. However, the Sanskrit used in Mahabharata is simpler than the Sanskrit used in Vedas or Prashastis. So the Sanskrit used in Vedas and Prashastis was much, much difficult, Sanskrit. As such, it was probably widely understood. So we believe that in those days, Sanskrit was widely understood by many people. Now we come to the content part. Historians usually classify the content of the present text under two categories. Okay, sections that contain stories is called narrative. Where stories are told, it's called narrative. And the sections, so this is first section, number 1, narrative. Sections that contain prescriptions about social norms. What were the social norms is called didactic. And the meaning of didactic is written here. Didactic refers to something that is meant for purposes of instruction. Narrative, where stories are told. Didactic, where the purpose was to tell the social norms, okay, rules. The division is by no means watertight, but we can't say now this page is narrative and other page is didactic, or one line is that. It's not like that. It's merged. Okay. Didactic sections include stories, and the narrative often contains a social message. However, generally, historians agree that the Mahabharata was meant to be a dramatic, moving story, and that the didactic portions were probably added later. So this is all point of views of different historians. Okay, that probably Mahabharata was written as a story, and then the didactic portion in which rules of social norms, are rules of society or rules of social behavior are told. Probably that portion was added later. So it's just a guesswork. Interestingly, the text is described as an itihasa within early Sanskrit tradition. The literal meaning of the term is thus it was. Itihasa, aisa tha, is ye aisa tha, which is why it is generally translated as history. Was there a real war that was remembered in the epic? We are not sure. Was that whether this war actually took place? We are not sure. Okay? Very, very important point. That whether really there was a war or not. Was there a real war that was remembered in the epic? We are not sure. Some historians think that the memory of an actual conflict amongst kinfolk was preserved in the narrative. Other historians say that there is no other corroborative evidence of the battle, that we do not have any other evidence to say that Mahabharata battle took place. We have not found any other evidence to prove, except from the text, there is no other evidence found till now which can say that Mahabharata battle actually took place. Very, very important point, children. Pay attention. Now we come to, if you remember, I'm going back where I told you all the points that we have to remember here. And I told you one important aspect was author, the authors, I'm talking about authors. Now we are going to read about author and dates. Who wrote the text? That means the author. This is a question to which there are several answers. Why are there several answers? Each historian has his own understanding, and we cannot come to any one conclusion. The original story was probably shayad, composed by charioteer bards. Now, who are charioteer bards? Charioteer, rath chalane wala. Bards, there used to be people जो रथ के ऊपर खड़े होते थे पीछे, और वो गाते जाते थे, बोलते जाते थे. एक रथ चला रहा है, उसमें कुछ लोग बैठे हैं और कुछ लोग बार्ड्स खड़े हैं जो कथा गा के सुना रहे हैं. Known as sutas, who generally accompanied Kshatriya warriors. So you come to know about charioteer bards. Who are charioteer bards? This is one theory. That they composed the original story. This is one theory. Okay, number one theory of author. Kshatriya warriors to the battlefield and composed poems celebrating their victories and other achievements. These compositions circulated orally. Then, from the 5th century BCE, Brahmins took over the story and began to commit it to writing. So charioteer bards, till 5th century BCE, they used to sing, relate the stories, talk about the achievements and victories of the kings, Kshatriya warriors, and they were oral, circulated from one bard to another, generation to generation. But from 5th century onwards, Brahmins started writing these stories of warriors, of kings. This was the time when chiefdoms, such as those of Kurus and Panchalas, around whom the story of epic revolves, were gradually becoming kingdoms. So, point to be noted that in 5th century BCE, these were chiefdoms, small chiefdoms. Which chiefdoms we are talking about? Kurus and Panchalas. Okay? And Kurus and Panchalas are mentioned in Mahabharata, the stories about these chiefdoms, and later on they became kingdoms. Chiefdoms are small, only if there is a chief and there are few people. Kingdom is large when there is a king and there are subjects. Did the new kings want their itihasa to be recorded and preserved more systematically? They wanted their history to be written. Is it possible that the upheavals means all the difficulties that often accompanied the establishment of these states, where old social values were often replaced by the new norms, are reflected in some parts of the story? So, are the upheavals reflected that there was coming a social change from chiefdom to kingdom? We notice another phase in the composition of the text between 200 BCE to 200 CE. This was the period when the worship of Vishnu was growing importance. This was becoming important, okay? And Krishna is supposed to be one of the avatars of Vishnu. And Krishna was coming to be identified with Vishnu. Subsequently, between 200 and 400 CE, large didactic sections resembling the Manusmriti were added. So now something similar like Manusmriti, social norms, didactic portion is about social norms, that these portions were added. We have read earlier, Mahabharata was written over a period of 1000 years. Now I'll talk about it. I'll tell you something more interesting now further. Let me finish this first. With these additions, a text which initially was less than 10,000 verses grew to comprise of about 1 lakh verses, shloks. This enormous composition is traditionally attributed to a sage named Vyasa. So it is believed that Guru Vyas Vyas Rishi ne Mahabharat likhi. Now comes a question. People argue that it must have not been written in 1000 years. Some historians say that because we see a large change coming, that chiefdoms becoming kingdoms and becoming Mahajanpadas. So this change took place in 1000 years. That is why the life of Mahabharata, they say it was written within 1000 years and not less than that. Some historians say that if the author was, the composition was written by Guru Vyas Guru, how can he live for 1000 years? To this, some historians answer that probably in those days, people lived for so long. So we still have doubts about it. But when the question is asked, you will write about all the theories that are mentioned in your book, and you will say that some historians believe in this while others believe in the other theory. Okay. The search for convergence. The Mahabharata, like any major epic, contains vivid descriptions of battles, forests, palaces, settlements. In 1951-52, archaeologist B.B. Lal excavated at a village called Hastinapur in Meerut, which is in Uttar Pradesh. Excavated, खुदाई करके देखा तो नीचे हमें एक शहर मिला और उस शहर को हस्तिनापुर माना गया कि ये हस्तिनापुर शहर है. हस्तिनापुर का नाम, एक हस्तिनापुर का नाम महाभारत में आता है. So historians are still not able to come to any conclusion whether this Hastinapur is the same that is mentioned in Mahabharata or not, because we have read that apart from Mahabharata text, we have no evidence that Mahabharata war was fought, that any war was fought. Now, we are not sure whether this Hastinapur is the same which is mentioned in Mahabharata or not. While the similarity in names could be coincidental, it can be a coincidence that same names are there, which is Hastinapur name is mentioned in Mahabharata, and then they have found a village called Hastinapur. The location of the site of Upper Ganga Doab, where Kuru kingdom was situated, suggests that it may have been the capital of Kurus, which is mentioned in Mahabharata. So because the location is also the same, where is the location? Ganga, Upper Ganga Doab, where Ganga meets, and it is the Upper Ganga, from where it is coming from, Himalayas mountains, and where earlier Kuru kingdom existed. Lal, B.B. Lal, archaeologist, found evidence of 5 occupational levels, of which the second and the third are of interest to us. This is what Lal noted about the houses in the second phase. So when he studied the houses of the villages that he has found, जो घर पुराने ज़माने की घर मिले, 12th and 17th century के माने जाते हैं वो घर थे. हमारा जो महाभारता है, it is from 5th century period, उस सेंचुरी का माना जाता है. तो much before this period we are talking about. Okay. Within the limited area excavated, no definite plans of houses were obtained. So he found that there was no definite plan. Houses were just made anywhere, but walls of mud and mud bricks were duly encountered. That everywhere there was one similarity, which was that walls were made of mud and mud bricks. That was one similarity, but there was no plan as such. It was not a planned village. Houses were made haphazardly. The discovery of mud plaster, with prominent reed marks, there are marks of reed सूखी हुई घास, और उसके marks हैं, because reed तो रहती नहीं है, घास तो perish हो गई, thousands of years तक नहीं रहेगी, उसके निशान हैं. There are marks plaster के ऊपर, over the plastered mud से plaster किया जाता था घरों को. आजकल हम किससे plaster करते हैं? With cement. For the third phase, he noted houses of this period were built of mud brick as well as burnt bricks. Burnt bricks, ईंटें जिनको पका के बनाया जाता है. उसके पहले के पीरियड में mud bricks, then burnt bricks, जो हड़प्पा में भी यूज़ हुआ है. Soakage jars and brick drains were used for draining out refuse water. Refuse water, जो गंदा पानी है किचन का और बाथरूम का. Terracotta ring wells may have been used both as wells and drainage pits. तो terracotta के wells यूज़ हुए. terracotta क्या होता है? पकी हुई. terracotta, all our matkas are made of terracotta. So they are strong and they are made of clay, and they keep cool. So they must have been used for wells and drainage pits. They have found some evidence. All right. Was the description of the city in the epic added after the main narrative that has been composed? when after the 6th century BCE, urban centers flourished in the region. So this is still a question which has not been answered. कि narrative कंपोज होने के बाद डिस्क्रिप्शन सिटी का ऐड किया गया बाद में 6th century BC में, और तो हो सकता है तब तक वो बन गई थी, ईंटें आ गई थी बर्nt, और वॉज इट अ फ्लाइट ऑफ पोएटिक फैंसी, या ये पोएट्स जो होते थे, पोएट्स समटाइम्स दे राइट पोइट्री एंड दे एग्जैजरेट, कुछ ज़्यादा बढ़ा के बोलते हैं, which cannot always be verified by comparisons with other kinds. We cannot verify. This has still not been verified. Consider another instance. One of the most challenging, children, very, very important. You get a question. It's important. You get a question about it. Challenging episode of Mahabharata. One of the most challenging episodes in Mahabharata is Draupadi's marriage with Pandavas, an instance of polyandry. What is polyandry? Polyandry means one woman having several husbands. That is central to the narrative because it's an important part of the story. Narrative is the story. And this part of Draupadi having five husbands, is a very important part. This system was called polyandry. If we examine the section of epic that describes this event, it is evident that the author, or maybe there were more than one authors, we are not sure, attempted to explain it in a variety of ways. So there are different ways of explaining why Draupadi had five husbands. So read the sources, you'll come to know about different explanations. These are just explanations which are given by various historians, and we have no clear evidence for why she had five husbands.